Good morning. This is Faith in Our Hometown, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin. And now, here's your host, Father Jay Friedel.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. I'm so glad you joined us this morning. Since the last time we were all together, I have entered my 60th year of life. There you have it. And I'm still here to tell the tale. But it's great that you've joined us this morning. We're going to be talking a little bit this morning about, with one of our Episcopal priest friends, so another man in black this morning, which is good for everybody, I think, or well, I'm just going to stick to that story. But at any rate, we're going to be talking a little bit this morning about dual careers and maybe coming to this a little later in life. I became a priest when I was 25. And our guest, Jim Lile, who's from the Episcopal Church up in Nevada, so hi there to the northern end of our viewing area. But he's been doing this, kind of as a second portion or second chapter in life. So we're going to talk about some of that this morning. So stick around and join us right after this Mercy Minute. Stick with us, and we'll be right back.
The dreaded tagged photo. I married the love of my life in October, and when I got home that night, I saw this. Frankly, this is every obese person's worst nightmare. You have no control, none, over what other people post. And up until that day, I'd been very careful about how I presented myself on social media. In fact, I generally only posted photos like this. What's sad is that I haven't always been like this. Confession, I've been a yo-yo dieter for roughly 10 years. When I met this amazing guy 3 years ago, he didn't care how much I weighed, but he did care about my health. A month after our wedding, I talked to my doctor and my journey began. Here's an honest and usually pretty entertaining look at how I got to bariatric surgery and beyond. Buckle up, check out my blog, Confessions of a Yo-Yo Dieter.
Well, again, thanks for joining us for another Sunday morning here at Faith in Our Hometown. My guest this morning, Reverend Jim Lile. Same way I'm Reverend Jay Friedel, Father Jim, Father Jay.
Good
Here
morning.
we go, we're good. But from All Saints Episcopal Church up in Nevada. So it's great that we got the northern end of our viewing area in there today, which is great. It takes a lot. So you made a little sacrifice coming down to record the show and everything. So we're grateful to you.
Diocesan coverage.
There you go. I love it. It's great. So, Jim, one of the things, why don't you just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself first, and then we'll get into this. How did you get into doing this in the second part of your career?
Well, I'm what the Episcopal Church refers to as bivocational. Okay. And I am a professor in the theater department at Missouri Southern.
Right.
And I have been a theater professor for a while, quite a while. And there was always sort of in the back of my mind the possibility, the idea that maybe someday it would be something that I needed to do. What made it possible for me, and I'm about to enter my 63rd year of life, so we're rocking right along. There is a school for ministry called the Bishop Kemper School for Ministry, which is housed at Grace Cathedral in the Diocese of Kansas. So it's there in Topeka. And four Episcopal dioceses are partners in that. So it's a situation where you do most of your work at home, and then you spend a focus weekend up at the cathedral with the other people in the school. So as you're finishing one class, you're beginning the next one, and you just rotate those over about 3 years. And that's what made it possible for me. The idea that I could attend a seminary in that sort of a format and then be able to be ordained as a priest. And I was ordained in 2017 in May and installed as the rector at All Saints in December of 2017.
Yeah. So how big is the church up there in Nevada?
We average around 40, 45 on a Sunday, and it's a good, loyal, steady group. They tend to surprise me. You'll have those mornings where you walk out and you're like, nobody's coming today, and then 40 people will show up. So it's a remarkable thing, and it's a good place for me to have landed because they are dedicated, committed. They take care of each other. Beautiful little church. It's the oldest building in Nevada built as a church building.
Oh, really?
And we have our 150th anniversary coming up in November, which is nice. I love it. All Saints Day actually falls on a Sunday this year, so we're going to be able to have that nice symmetry to have our anniversary.
Cool. And it's 100 years this year.
150.
150. Okay. So that would make more sense in terms of if it was the first one in Nevada. So that's good. Yeah. So I mean, one of the hats that I wear is a campus ministry at Southern, and And certainly we had, I worked over at Southeast and had, a lot of interaction with one of the Episcopal priests that was there in Cape Girardeau, and we worked and taught together at the university and did all kinds of things. And so, but it's interesting, at the same time, I also served on some discernment committees, for people who were, some of my other colleagues who were thinking about doing this again a little bit later in life. Yeah. And so, how did that get stirred up? How did that come to be?
Well, the one sort of feeds the other. I have known several people in my life who hit that theater ministry crossroads. So I've known several ministers who would be excellent actors and several actors who'd be great pastors. I just get to do both, which is marvelous. But as you well know, dealing with university students or any students, there are things that crop up. There are ways that you can be useful. There are ways that you can be helpful. And so that part of the position is really very similar. And in the theater, indeed, in the arts generally, you're talking about the human spirit, and you're talking about those things that can elevate us, that can educate us, that can illuminate life, make things, if not necessarily easier, at least comprehensible. And sometimes when you understand what's going on, it's a little easier to deal with those things. And so there was always that feeling that if possible, it would be great to be in a pastoral sort of role. And as I say, the Kemper School just really sort of was the last piece in that puzzle, and that made it work.
Yeah. So you'd been thinking about this for several years.
Oh, yeah. It's I've been through a number of different traditions, spent some time with Presbyterians and Methodists and all kinds of folks, and it's really kind of interesting that when we moved to Joplin for the job at Southern, we did some church shopping, we tried some different sorts of things, and had not really been to the Episcopal Church. But we went to St. Philip's, and it was really literally one of those, okay, it sort of just felt like the place to be.
Good to you.
And so one thing and another, with the support of that congregation, helping me to go through the entire process, it just fell into line, and it was really quite remarkable. So 2 afternoons a week and Sundays, I'm able to be in Nevada, and the rest of the time I wear my other head over at Missouri Southern.
There you go. Well, I've known many of the people from that community, and I bet that when they believe in you, I'm sure that they were very supportive of you being able to do all that. And of course, you got your own community now. Again, it's interesting the way you kind of get. One place kind of dreams you and helps you dream into being in one way, and then you have to uproot and go somewhere else and do what's next.
And the beauty is when you find that similar spirit, when you find the saints of the church who have been there for years, and then the more recent people, and yet they're all just the same sort of unity, the same sort of spirit. The idea, the really clear idea of what a parish church is about and what it can be and the work that can be done. And giving, just remarkable giving and love. It's just a remarkable thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about this theater ministry connection, because if nobody can, I had a theater background myself. Did a lot when I was in high school and college, and I've always found the two to be a great synergy with one or the other, because I think that good theater is good liturgy. Okay, the way we pray, which is kind of in a very stylized fashion. Good theater is good liturgy. I mean, you set the stage well. You make sure that all of your things are clear and unblocked and can speak for themselves well, and you kind of wind the thing up, and then you see where God's going to take you in the middle of it.
And the roots are the same, because the theater grows out of religious observance.
Yes.
Originally in the ancient world, and for the medieval people, the theater was a primary means of communicating religious truth to their people. And so they are very similar. And yeah, go ahead.
Say a little bit more about that, because I really think that's a lot of people who've not done a theater or a history of religion or a history of theater would not know some of those pieces.
Well,
I want to make sure that our viewers can understand some of that.
The medieval church particularly was dealing with a population that was largely illiterate.
Yes.
They couldn't read. And so the cathedrals were beautifully decorated with stories from the Bible. And then the service that you went to was in Latin. So somebody was telling you what that was about. But then on festival days, they would mount these plays. And they called them cycles because they cycle from the creation of the world with God back to our return to God and the final reconciliation. And so most of the Bible got dramatized as a part of that. And so people would see that and learn from that. And so it became a very didactic and important tool for the church in that time.
Yeah, every once in a while, one of my colleagues when I was at Southeast Missouri State would do morality plays or things like that. And again, I get to come in and talk about that piece of how to connect all that, which was a lot of fun. But those those pageants and everything that were basically meant to tell stories.
Yep,
and
absolutely.
they were the same way. And again, that works in our churches with their stained glass. It works through the stonework. It works through the carvings. It works through the artwork. It works through all of those things. Which again, in a place like ours that concentrates a little bit on the smells and the bells to make it all come about, we let that be the catalyst that moves us to those other spots. There's something about watching your prayers go up like incense when you use incense. And when that catches, when the stained glass on a Sunday morning catches those whiffs of smoke, and it captures imagination in a different way. Now some would argue and say, well, you don't need all that stuff, and it's true, you don't need it.
Right.
But boy, from our perspective, it sure helps.
Well, when you walk into a church and the air is a different color because of the windows and the candles and the smell, it's a different environment. It's a different place. And the theater works the same way. You come into the theater, you read your program, the lights go down, you're in a different place. And so, to capture that imagination, as you say, and make it possible to just sort of give yourself to this experience that you're having. And I agree with you that theater and liturgy are not that far away. And one of the things that I'm continually impressed with in my own ministry is, in the theater we talk about the illusion of the first time. You can't go to the play and it look like it's been done for a week already because it looks tired and it looks stale. And so actors are always conscious of, this is the first time we've told this story to this group of people. And I think the liturgy is that way as well. It's so ever fresh and it's always new that it can't ever sound tired and old.
Well, that's, I think, if we're doing it right, okay?
Yeah.
Because one of the phrases we use is ever ancient, ever new, and again, it's, sometimes people, say, well, how is this sacrifice of, being redone? It's like, well, it's not really redone. It was Jesus doing his thing, 2,000 years ago, but we're still caught up in it. And so it's our celebration and our tying into it in this day and age that keeps it new for us, even though it happened 2,000 years ago. We're caught up in the experience now, which, again, time and space, as I say, come colliding together.
Yeah.
And we're suddenly in that, tied up in that experience.
Whenever you do it, remember me.
Exactly.
So there we are.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. And, the one thing, and we're getting ready to go to a break here in a second, but I want to say this too. This is the one thing, now being a theater person, I always just said this. I don't know whether you've ever reflected on this, but when you're an actor, you're portraying other roles. But what's so interesting to me is when we do our liturgy, when we do our holy acting, we do it in a very real sense where it's the only time you actually become the role that you're portraying, which to me is, again, so liturgy is transformative in that thing. So we're all, in some words, play acting in the person of Jesus in the hopes that Jesus is going to give us the grace to become other Christs.
Yeah, we owe our people that authenticity, and I keep coming back. One of the archbishops of Canterbury said that everything a priest does points to Jesus.
It's supposed to.
And so
we're doing the job right.
That's something I hold on to.
Yeah, that's good. Well, we're going to be right back after this Mercy Minute, after a quick break. We don't have a Mercy Minute yet, so this is going to be a real quick break. So refresh your coffee or whatever, and we're going to be right back with Father Jim Lile, who's director at All Saints Episcopal in Nevada.
You're watching Faith in Our Hometown on KSN TV, brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.
Well, again, thanks for sticking with us this morning. My guest, Father Jim Lile, who is the rector at All Saints Episcopal Church in Nevada, the northern part of our region here. So, Jim, as we talked about some of this stuff and how you came into this, so just how many years were you thinking about this before you finally were able to step into this extra calling? Bivocational. I don't know, I've never thought about it. It's interesting, different phrases, the Episcopal Church, bivocational. How did you get going in this thing?
Well, my father was a minister of education and music in the Southern Baptist Church, and so it was always a part of our environment that would be going on. And I talk to my people sometimes about my wilderness experience. I had mine like everybody does. No church, I'm not going to church, forget about it, which made it all the more important when I did go back and did get really involved with what was going on, and discovered in myself not just a desire to study the Word and understand what was going on there, but the context in which it happened, the stories around the stories and those kinds of things. And the liturgy of the Episcopal Church I find so appealing as like you say, a touchstone, a place to connect, those sorts of things. And then the opportunity to be with people at important moments in their lives.
Oh, you gotta love that.
You know, those sorts of things, but also just the day-to-day where you learn them and you're just taking that walk together. And it's something I'm afraid I probably harp on a lot at All Saints, is just Jesus set us up for community. And so to the extent that we can contribute to that community, whether it is being there at a bedside or being there for an anniversary, those different kinds of things, it all fits together. And so that really was kind of the motivation, you know, dealing with students, dealing with people, dealing with the great truths of human life through the arts. It just seemed a natural sort of, you know, next step for me.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So you thought about this for a little while, and then that last piece of being able to go to school came in there. Mm-hmm. Did you do some discernment? I mean, you know, which is 50-cent word for trying to figure out where God wants you to be. Okay. Did you do some of that work? Like I say, was that what you did with the folks at St. Philip's?
It's built in. Yeah, it's built into our process. That the St. Philip's established a committee, and we had several meetings together where we talked about different issues and things. So, yeah, it's a very careful process. Is this really what you want to do? You know, and then the whole idea of, you know, teaching yourself a lot of times at the school, you know, the work that you had to do on your own, and then meeting for really a marvelously refreshing weekend. All the services, you know, morning prayer and evening prayer and all those things that we did. It gives you a lot of opportunity to go, this may not be for me, you know. And then, as you know, there's then exams and all those other things that have to happen. But I think it's a very careful process that we have in the church.
Yeah, I got to be full disclosure here. I helped serve on one of those committees over in Cape Girardeau for one of my colleagues at who had a lot of connections with the university. She's actually a therapist there in the town. And I got to walk with her on her journey because they were looking for an outsider, if you will, to be on the committee. And so I was, you know, over there and working, and they said, why don't we ask, you know, Jay to come over and do this with us? And so it was really a privilege to be able to do that with that community because, you know, we sat and over the course of many, many months and just had the opportunity to reflect with, you know, Judy and on her life. Of what was going on, and you know, I think she was eventually, after I left Cape to come over here, was eventually ordained and is helping there. I think it's one of the things I love about the Episcopal Church is that in one of my other friends is a rector of a church in New York City, and we used to be in Chicago, and we've known each other for several years, and you know, but I'm always amazed at the number of extra ministers they get who, because like you know, would come in from a different way of life or still had another job or another, you know, work or whatever, but yet still can be brought into the ministry and into ordained roles in that regard. Whereas typically for us, unless you are ordained, you don't get quite as many opportunities to bring other people with other walks of life into that.
Yeah, and it adds a nice sort of layer to things because, as you say, there are folks who are still pursuing other jobs. I mean, our Archbishop now of Canterbury came from a whole corporate background before he became the Archbishop of Canterbury. So you do get different insights, you do different kinds of opinions and ways of thinking about things. I've always been in academia, and so that's kind of where my mindset is. But the idea that it is that inclusive, that you can come in and do those things. It's really a nice thing, I think.
Well, I've just been amazed. I mean, you know, every once in a while, you know, we'll, you know, do other things when I'm, you know, especially this, you know, friend's church, you know, because I go to at least church there once over the weekend, you know, sometime in there. And it always to me is fascinating because, you know, every once in a while it'll be somebody else who's preaching, you know, or somebody who's like a mom, and hearing that, kind of that experience of being a mom tied into the preaching, or somebody who, again, is coming from a corporate background, or somebody who's, second career now is doing this, whereas before it was, doing something else. And I'm always fascinated with, again, as you say, the different layers of the way that works in terms of the proclamation of the word, and especially in terms of the preaching.
Well, and the day-to-day, like you said, the walk that you have with people, it's like, what do they need to hear? What sort of things can we be sure that we talk about? Which is, as I say, the idea of community, the idea of grace, the idea of perseverance in the faith, and those sorts of things that never get old. But you're able to sort of take the pulse of your parish and understand the kind of things that they're looking to you for. And then you just hope that with God's help, you're able to give that to them.
Yeah. Have there been any surprises for you since you started ministry? I mean, is it just pretty much the way you thought it was going to be, or have you had any of those aha moments or those kinds of things?
Well, it's kind of the way I thought it would be, except I am continually humbled by what people will take away from what you've said. There are those moments after the service where, this really spoke to me, or a couple or 3 weeks later, this really spoke to me. That's happened to me so frequently in the academic world, where a student will come back years later. I remember when you said X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, I don't remember saying X, Y, and Z, but you understand then that really in that role and in a pastoral role, you're basically, to use a theatrical term, you're on all the time. So that understanding is, I think, an important thing. Yeah, you live your life and you are who you are, but at the same time, there is this other function that you have signed on to perform. And so the idea that you're never really sure what's going to land. And so you try to be sure you're giving your best stuff all the time.
Yeah. And I mean, and that is kind of a humble, in some ways, it's kind of difficult, but I think every Christian is supposed to do this, not just those of us who do it, but people are watching us, so if you screw it up, everybody's like going,
you're the whole church.
Look there, see? But I do think that all of us are supposed to try to take that on as truly other Christs, if we're going to be Christians and we're going to sign ourselves in that way.
Yep.
How do we do that? And it's hard because, the minute that you just start out and try to do it, you're going to mess it up. Because, who's going to live up to the standard of Jesus?
Yeah.
But it's still that humbling challenge to try to do that every day. And to do it not because people are watching you, but just simply because it's what you desire to live.
Well, and it's claiming what you are and what you have. So often, I'm not smart enough. I haven't studied the Bible enough. I don't know enough. Well, yeah, you do. You've made the step. You've professed the faith. You're living the life, and that's all the resume you need.
Well, and again, as a resume, it's not so that everybody can say, "Look at me," but just simply to say, I believe in something so much that I want to give witness to it. I believe in something so much that I want to share it with you. I believe in something so much because it's made such a difference in my life, and I'm hoping and praying that it's going to be the same thing for you in your life. And that's when you stand in a pulpit, because it's whenever you stand in a pulpit, it's not saying, "Hey, look at me," or "My story is so important." You only tell your story to the degree that it can help other people to connect with their stories while it's happening, which I think is again, it is very humbling. I agree with you in that regard.
Yeah, I had the opportunity Sunday. Our Old Testament reading was from Isaiah, and so the people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. And I needed to take the opportunity to remind my folks that they're part of that light, and to hold on to that and to claim that every day.
Yeah, it is, and it is. It's just an amazing. It's an amazing transformative process because again, it's kind of like that whole thing. There's a song from an old folk singer who'd say, that all the grace is going to flow like a river from the changer to the changed. Okay. And eventually you'll both get all so filled up that it just spills over, which is an amazing thing. Yeah. So, in terms of, you commute to Nevada all the time, don't you? Boy, how's that work? I thought my commutes were bad. Because I go between Carthage and Webb City and Joplin, and so I drive around in triangles. But that's quite a commute.
It's an hour door to door from my place to the church, and so I've become very familiar with Route 43. And every now and then I break it up and come to Carthage and go up that way.
Yeah.
It's a good time to think. It's a good time to run over things, and happily there's satellite radio playing the classical music, so life is good.
It's so interesting to me because on a Sunday morning when I drive around from place to place, Sometimes I can listen to the music. Sometimes I can have the classical music. I can't listen to anything with words because that just kind of throws me off my game. But if I'm listening to the classical music, sometimes I have to turn it off too, because if it's something like Bach and my brain has to go, and then I can't, then I just have to turn it off and I just have to do the silence. So it's interesting. But I love the windshield time in terms of doing some of that. Well, any last word to people who are out there thinking about, maybe entering into ministry at a different later stage in life or a mid-stage in life?
Well, it's the old cliche, it's never really too late. It's just, and the opportunities are there. The opportunities line up, and it's important to sort of watch for them and see them when they happen and go for it.
Yeah. Again, talking this morning with Father Jim Lile, who's the rector at All Saints Episcopal Church in Nevada, also a colleague at Missouri Southern, which is always wonderful to have somebody on there. Wearing two hats, theater teacher and professor at one place, and rector of a small Episcopal church in another spot. So good. We'll be right back after this Mercy Minute to wrap up.
I was in shock, and in denial, and I couldn't believe it was me. I was healthy, feeling well, but unbeknownst to me, after the colonoscopy, I found out that I had colon cancer. My name is Mario Guerrero. I'm an ethicist. I help people that are in a hospital and the medical staff process some of the difficult situations. In this case, it was the other way around.
Well, I'm glad they caught it earlier.
On my 50th birthday, I had a regular checkup. I wasn't concerned because I felt well. No family history of this type of cancer, and yet I developed this type of cancer. During the process of the colonoscopy, they were able to remove that polyp. And having that done within the hospital setting, they can just address all the issues right there and then. I'm a great believer in early detection. This is such a silent disease, and you really don't necessarily have symptoms. Go get checked. Follow up with your physician. Don't wait.
One of my favorite things about doing this show all the time is the fact of talking to other ministers and other traditions and seeing how things are similar, but yet sometimes how things are different. And I enjoy that. And so my guest this morning, Father Jim Lile, the Reverend Jim Lile, who is the rector at All Saints Episcopal up in Nevada, was a great conversation this morning, just talking about things that we had in common, things that we do that. If we really try, I think we can find some things in common with other churches. I think we can find things that connect us rather than all the things that separate us. Yes, we believe a little differently, we practice a little differently, we go at things a little differently, and depending on which pew in the church we sit in, it'll look a little different. But what I am saying to all of you is, do talk to your neighbors about these things, because I think they're important. Let's talk to each other and find our commonalities. Thanks, and come back again and join us next week for another episode of Faith in Our Hometown. God bless. Happy Sunday.
Thanks for watching. Faith in Our Hometown can be seen Sunday mornings at 6:30 and 9 a.m. on KSN. Brought to you as a community service and sponsored by Mercy Hospital, Joplin.